The morning sun filtered through the massive transparent dome of the Galactic Academy, casting colorful patterns across the xenobiology classroom. Students from dozens of different worlds sat in specially designed seats that accommodated their various body types. Some had 4 legs, others had tentacles, and a few floated in anti-gravity fields. Professor Velness stood at the front of the room, her crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns across the walls. She was tall, nearly 3 meters, and her voice resonated like wind chimes when she spoke. Today, she seemed particularly excited about the lesson. "Class, I hope you all remembered our special assignment," Professor Velness announced, her crystalline face somehow managing to convey warmth despite having no traditional features. "Today is Cultural Artifacts Day, a tradition we have maintained for over 200 years at this academy." The students murmured with excitement. Some had brought containers and cases of various sizes, which sat beside their desks or floated nearby in containment fields. Tai Yang sat near the middle of the classroom, his human frame looking oddly plain compared to his exotic classmates. He was young, perhaps 20 standard years, with dark hair and eyes that constantly observed everything around him. Next to his desk sat a large metallic case approximately 1 meter long and half a meter wide. It was gunmetal gray with reinforced corners and several small lights blinking along its edge. "The rules remain the same as always," Professor Velness continued, walking between the rows of students. "You must bring an artifact from your home culture. It must be safe, non-threatening, and represent something meaningful about your people. This exercise helps us understand that despite our differences, we all have beauty and value in our cultures." Hirin, who sat directly next to Tai Yang, leaned over with curiosity. She was Valtorian, with smooth silvery skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Her 4 eyes blinked in sequence, 2 on each side of her elegant face. "You have been very quiet about your artifact, Tai Yang. What did you bring from Earth?" Tai Yang smiled mysteriously. "You will see. I think everyone will find it interesting." "That is what worries me," Hirin said, but she was smiling. She had known Tai Yang for almost 6 months now, and humans always had unusual perspectives on things. Humans have a strange definition of interesting. Across the room, Minho shifted his scaled body in his seat. He was Scrath, a reptilian species known for their artistic abilities. His amber eyes fixed on Taeyang's case with suspicion. "That container has power cells in it. I can hear the energy hum from here. What kind of cultural artifact needs that much power?" "A human one, apparently," said Jiwon, her telepathic voice echoing gently in everyone's minds. She was Mindari, a species that communicated primarily through thought projection. Her pale blue form was almost ghost-like, and she rarely spoke aloud. "I sense excitement from Taeyang, and perhaps a little mischief," Taeyang laughed. "I promise it follows all the rules. It is completely safe and represents human culture perfectly." Professor Velness clapped her crystalline hands together, creating a pleasant chiming sound that brought the class to attention. "Wonderful. Let us begin our presentations. Remember, this is not a competition. This is about sharing and learning. Minho, would you like to start?" Minho stood, carrying a smooth stone about the size of a human fist. It was deep purple with veins of silver running through it. He placed it on the demonstration platform at the front of the class, and the platform activated, projecting the stone's image larger so everyone could see. "This is a singing stone from my homeworld," Minho explained, his forked tongue flickering as he spoke. "It has been in my family for 7 generations. Watch what happens when I touch it." He placed his scaled hand on the stone, and immediately it began to glow. A soft humming filled the room, beautiful and sad at the same time. The sound seemed to resonate with emotions, making several students visibly moved. "The singing stone responds to the emotional state of whoever touches it," Minho explained. "It teaches us that our feelings are not weakness but something beautiful to be shared. In Scrath culture, we pass these stones down through families, and each generation adds their emotions to the stone's memory." The class applauded politely, and several students asked questions about how the stones were formed and whether they could be found on other planets. Professor Velness praised Minho's presentation and the cultural significance of his artifact. Jiwon went next, floating to the front of the room. She brought out what looked like a small crystalline cube that pulsed with soft light. "This is a thought-weaving device. In Mindari culture, we create art not with our hands but with our minds." She activated the device, and suddenly, beautiful images began to appear in the air above it. Landscapes of impossible beauty, abstract patterns of color and light, scenes of Mindari history and dreams. The images flowed and changed like a living painting, responding to Jiwon's thoughts. We believe that the mind is the purest form of expression, Jiwon's mental voice explained. This device helps us share our inner visions with those who cannot read minds. It is used in schools and art galleries and in homes throughout our world. More students presented their artifacts. Daehyun, a Crustian with thick armor plating and multiple arms, showed a ceremonial shield that had protected his ancestors in ancient wars, but now was only used in peaceful ceremonies. Sujin, a gentle plenty with plant-like features, brought a seed pod that could grow into a living shelter in just a few hours, demonstrating her people's harmony with nature. Each presentation was met with respect and curiosity. The artifacts ranged from practical to artistic, from ancient to modern, but all of them represented the peaceful and creative aspects of their cultures. Finally, Professor Wellness's eyes settled on Taiyang. I believe you are the last one, Taiyang. Please show us what humans consider a meaningful cultural artifact. Taiyang stood and lifted the metallic case with both hands. It was clearly heavy, and the case made a mechanical sound as he carried it to the demonstration platform. Several students leaned forward with interest. The case looked industrial, almost military in design. That is a very serious-looking container for a cultural artifact, Professor Wellness observed, a note of concern in her chiming voice. Please tell me you remembered the rules about safety. Of course, Professor, Taiyang said cheerfully. This is completely safe. I promise. In fact, human children play with these all the time. He set the case down on the platform and entered a code on the digital lock. The case hissed as pressure seals released and small clouds of coolant vapor escaped from the edges. The lid opened slowly, and Taiyang reached inside carefully. Hyerin stood up slightly from her seat, trying to get a better view. Minhyo's eyes widened. Even Jiwon projected a sense of intense curiosity. Taeyang pulled out what appeared to be a small humanoid figure, perhaps 30 centimeters tall. It was clearly mechanical with visible joints and panels. The exterior was painted in matte black and gunmetal gray, with small details picked out in red. It looked like a tiny robot, but its proportions were distinctly combat-oriented, with broad shoulders, reinforced limbs, and a head design that suggested advanced sensors. The classroom fell completely silent. Class, Taeyang said with a proud smile, this is what we call a miniature mech. On Earth, humans build and pilot these for fun. This is my hobby. Professor Wellness stared at the small machine. Several students exchanged confused glances. The small robot sat motionless in Taeyang's hands, its dark surface reflecting the classroom lights. That, Daehyun said slowly, his voice rumbling with disbelief, is a weapon platform. No, Taeyang corrected cheerfully. It is a toy. The class erupted in questions. Taeyang held the small mechanical figure up so everyone could see it better. The classroom lighting reflected off its dark metal surface, highlighting the intricate details of its construction. Every joint looked precisely engineered. Every panel seemed to serve a purpose. To the alien students, it looked nothing like a toy. Please explain, Professor Wellness said carefully, her crystalline form shifting color slightly with concern, how this is a harmless cultural artifact. Well, Taeyang began, setting the mech down on the demonstration platform. On Earth, building and piloting miniature mechs is a very popular hobby. Thousands of people do it. We have competitions, conventions, and entire communities dedicated to it. This particular model is what we call hobby grade, which means I built it myself from a kit. Hyerin's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of confusion in Valtorian body language. You built this yourself? You have the skills to construct combat robots? It is not really a combat robot, Taeyang explained. Well, I mean, it is designed to look like one and move like one, but it is scaled down. Everything is smaller and less powerful. The ratio is 1 to 10, so if this was a real military mech, it would be about 3 meters tall. This explanation did not seem to comfort anyone. Daehyun stood up from his seat, his armored bulk making the floor vibrate slightly. As someone who served in his planet's defense force, he recognized military design when he saw it. That chassis design is optimized for combat movement. Those joints allow for rapid directional changes. That head unit clearly houses sensor arrays. You are telling me humans give these to children? Not small children, Taeyang said, as if this made it better. Usually people start around 8 or 9 years old with the basic models. This is an advanced model. I have been building and modifying it for 3 years. Sujin, the gentle plenty, made a soft, distressed sound. Her plant-like features actually wilted slightly. Why would your people want children to play with war machines? Are humans in constant conflict? No, Taeyang said quickly, waving his hands. We have wars sometimes, yes, but this is not about that. This is about engineering, problem-solving, and creativity. Let me show you. It will make more sense if you see it in action. He pulled out a small remote control from his pocket. It was surprisingly simple, with 2 joysticks and a few buttons. The device was clearly well used, with worn areas where Taeyang's thumbs regularly rested. This is safe, correct? Professor Wellness asked, though she made no move to stop him. The academic in her was clearly curious despite her concerns. Completely safe, Taeyang assured her. I will just activate it and show you some basic movements. He pressed a button on the remote, and immediately the small mech came to life. Its eyes lit up with a soft blue glow. Small motors whirred as it shifted its weight and stood up on its own. The movement was smooth and eerily lifelike. Several students jumped in their seats. Minho hissed softly, his reptilian instincts reacting to the predatory grace of the movement. The mech stood at attention on the platform, its glowing eyes scanning the room. Taeyang manipulated the controls and the mech began to walk. Its gait was perfectly balanced, each foot placement precise and calculated. It walked to the edge of the platform, stopped, turned 90 degrees and walked back. See? Taeyang said. Basic movement. This is what beginners learn first. The mech has gyroscopic stabilizers to keep it balanced, and the AI assists with the walking calculations so the pilot can focus on strategy and positioning. Jiwon's telepathic voice filled everyone's minds. It has artificial intelligence? A thinking machine that controls a combat frame? A very simple AI, Taeyang clarified. It just helps with balance and basic motor functions. The pilot makes all the real decisions. Watch, I will show you more. He worked the controls with practiced ease and the mech responded instantly. It dropped into a low crouch, then sprang up and performed a perfect backwards flip, landing in a ready stance. Several students gasped. The movement was too fast, too precise. This was not clumsy machinery. This was a weapon that moved like a living predator. Taeyang made the mech walk forward, then suddenly it burst into a sprint. Despite its small size, the speed was impressive. It ran the length of the platform, jumped, spun in midair, and landed facing the opposite direction, all in one fluid motion. The servos allow for rapid acceleration, Taeyang explained. Speaking like an engineer now, his enthusiasm clear. The power-to-weight ratio is carefully calculated. The armor is lightweight composite material. The whole design is about efficiency and performance. Hyerin slowly approached the platform, fascinated despite her nervousness. May I see it up close? Of course, Taeyang said. He pressed a button and the mech straightened up, standing at a relaxed attention. I will put it in demonstration mode. It will not move unexpectedly. Hyerin leaned down, her silvery face close to the small machine. This close, she could see even more details. Tiny hydraulic lines, miniature circuit boards visible through transparent panels, micro-sensors embedded in the armor plating. This is incredibly sophisticated. The engineering is remarkable. Minho joined her, his artistic eye appreciating the aesthetic design. The proportions are very deliberate. Everything about this design suggests purpose and function. There is a beauty to it, but it is the beauty of a weapon. That is the point, Taeyang said. Human mech designers spend years perfecting the balance between form and function. Some people focus on speed builds, others on heavy armor, others on precision and agility. Every mech tells you something about the person who built it. Professor Wellness studied the small machine with new interest. What does yours tell us about you, Taeyang? Taeyang thought for a moment. I prefer balanced designs. Not the fastest, not the heaviest, but adaptable. I like mechs that can handle different situations. In competitions, specialists might beat me in their specific areas, but I can compete in any category. Daehyun walked closer, his multiple arms crossing in thought. You mentioned competitions. Humans fight with these. Yes, but it is completely controlled and safe, Taeyang explained. There are different competition types. Some are races, some are obstacle courses, and some are combat simulations. The combat ones use special arenas with shields and safety systems. The mechs fight until one is disabled or surrenders. No one gets hurt. But the skills you learn, Daehyun pressed, these are combat skills. Tactical thinking, weapons handling, strategic positioning, Yes, Taeyang admitted. That is part of the appeal. Humans enjoy testing themselves against challenges. We like competition, but we also like that this is all simulated and safe. No one actually dies. It is like playing chess, but with robots. Jiwon projected a thoughtful sensation. On my world, we have strategy games too, but they are abstract. Patterns and puzzles. We do not create miniature versions of weapons to play with. Different cultures, different approaches, Taeyang said with a shrug. Humans have always been builders and fighters. This hobby lets us do both in a way that brings people together, instead of driving them apart. Professor Wellness made a decision. Taeyang, I would like to see the full capabilities of this machine. For educational purposes, you understand. I think the class needs to fully comprehend what human children play with. Taeyang hesitated. Are you sure? It might be a bit intense. Show us, Professor Wellness said firmly. Taeyang nodded slowly and accessed a different menu on his remote control. Okay, but remember this is still just a toy, a hobby. Something humans do for fun. He entered a command sequence and the mech's eyes changed from blue to amber. Its stance shifted subtly, becoming lower, more aggressive. The entire bearing of the machine changed in an instant. Where before it had seemed impressive, now it seemed dangerous. Combat mode activated, Taeyang said quietly. The classroom atmosphere changed. Every student sat up straighter. Their various forms of attention fixated on the small machine that suddenly seemed much larger than its 30 centimeters of height. The mech moved differently now, each small adjustment calculated and purposeful. Taeyang worked the controls and the mech began to move through combat patterns. It was no longer demonstrating basic movements. It was hunting. The miniature mech moved across the demonstration platform with a completely different quality now. Where before its movements had been smooth and impressive, now they were predatory and efficient. Every step seemed calculated for maximum tactical advantage. Every pause was a threat assessment. Taeyang manipulated the controls with focused precision. The combat AI changes how the mech processes information. It is still just following my commands, but now it is actively scanning for threats and optimal positioning. Watch. He pressed a button, and suddenly the mech's head snapped to the left, tracking something. Small panels on its shoulders opened, revealing what looked like tiny weapons systems. They were only sensor arrays and laser pointers, but the implication was clear. This was a weapons platform, miniaturized. Those are simulated weapon systems, Taeyang explained. The lasers represent plasma cannons in a full-size mech. They can track targets and calculate firing solutions. In a competition, they register hits on special sensors that the opponent mechs wear. Daehyun moved closer, his professional interest overriding his initial alarm. Show me the targeting system. Taeyang nodded and pointed the remote toward Minho. Instantly, the mech turned to face the Scrath student. A small red dot appeared on Minho's chest, projected from the mech's shoulder laser. Minho froze, his scales rippling with instinctive fear. Target acquired, Taeyang said. Distance calculated. Threat assessment complete. In a real combat scenario, the AI would suggest optimal firing patterns based on the target's movement and defenses. He released the targeting lock, and the red dot disappeared. Minho exhaled in relief, though he continued staring at the small machine with new respect. But it does not just stand and shoot, Taeyang continued. Watch the tactical movement patterns. He ran the mech through a combat exercise. The small machine sprinted forward, then suddenly dove to the side in a roll that would have avoided incoming fire. It came up in a crouch, its weapon arms tracking imaginary enemies. Then it backpedaled while maintaining its facing, using cover that did not exist, its movements showing clear combat training. The AI is programmed with actual military tactics, Taeyang explained. Cover usage, flanking maneuvers, suppressive fire patterns, retreat strategies. Everything a real combat unit would know, just scaled down to hobby level. Sujin's gentle voice trembled slightly. And human children learn all of this? Combat tactics and weapons handling? Well, yes, but it is not as serious as it sounds, Taeyang tried to explain. It is like learning the rules of a game. Nobody actually thinks they are training for war. We just enjoy the challenge of outmaneuvering our opponents in competitions. Professor Wellness's crystalline body had taken on a deeper hue, indicating deep thought. Taeyang, please show us what other capabilities this machine possesses. I believe we need to fully understand the scope of human recreational technology. Taeyang accessed another menu on his remote. Okay, this is the sensor suite demonstration. The mech has multiple detection systems built in, even at this scale. The mech's eyes changed color again, cycling through different spectrums. Blue is normal vision, red is thermal imaging, green is motion tracking, yellow is electromagnetic detection. As he spoke, a small holographic display projected from the mech's head, showing what its sensors detected. When set to thermal, it showed heat signatures of all the students in the room. Motion tracking highlighted everything that moved, calculating velocity and trajectory. The electromagnetic setting revealed all the electronic devices in the classroom. "This is insane," Hyerin whispered, her 4 eyes wide. "This is full military-grade sensor technology." "Miniaturized and simplified," Taeyang corrected. "But yes, the principles are the same. Human hobby engineers have access to a lot of technology. We like to push boundaries and see what we can build." Jiwan's telepathic voice carried a note of disbelief. "Your civilization allows civilians to possess this knowledge?" "There are no restrictions?" "Some restrictions," Taeyang admitted. "We cannot build actual weapons that hurt people. And there are size limits for hobby mechs. But the technology itself? That is freely available. Humans believe that knowledge should be shared and that most people will use it responsibly." Daehyun rumbled thoughtfully. "On my world, only military personnel would be allowed to learn these systems. The knowledge of combat tactics and weapons deployment is carefully controlled." "Different philosophy," Taeyang said. "Humans figure that if we teach everyone about weapons and combat, then everyone understands the dangers and the responsibilities. We do not hide the knowledge. We educate about it." He pressed another button. "Let me show you the communications array." The mech's antenna extended and suddenly the classroom's speakers crackled. "This is Unit Taeyang 04, reporting all systems operational, requesting tactical data upload." The voice was synthesized but clear, and it came from the tiny mech itself. Several students jumped at the unexpected sound. "The mech can communicate on multiple frequencies," Taeyang explained. "In team competitions, multiple mechs coordinate their actions through encrypted channels. They share targeting data, position information, and tactical assessments in real time." He demonstrated by having the mech report various status updates. It announced its armor integrity, ammunition levels for simulated weapons, energy reserves, and system functionality. Each report was concise and military in format. "Squad coordination is essential in advanced competitions," Taeyang continued. 3 to 5 mechs working together, each pilot with their own specialty. The mechs constantly communicate, updating each other on battlefield conditions. Minho spoke up, his artistic nature finding patterns in what he saw. "This is not random design. Everything you show us is part of a larger combat doctrine. The sensors feed information to the targeting systems. The communication allows for squad tactics. The mobility enables rapid repositioning. This is a complete combat system." "Yes," Taeyang agreed simply. "That is why it is fun. The challenge is not just building a mech, but understanding how all the systems work together. Then in competition, you pit your understanding against someone else's. It is like physical chess with robots." Professor Velness requested another demonstration. "Can you show us a complete combat scenario? A simulated battle engagement?" Taeyang hesitated. "That might be too intense for some students. Academic purposes," Professor Velness insisted. "We need to understand." Taeyang nodded and accessed the most advanced program on his remote. "Okay, this is a full combat simulation. The mech will act as if it is in an actual battle scenario. Remember, this is all pretend. Nothing is real." He activated the program and the transformation was startling. The mech immediately dropped into a combat-ready stance, its sensors sweeping the room in a tactical pattern. It identified the closest door as an entry point that needed watching. It noted the windows as potential sniper positions. It calculated the best cover positions using the classroom furniture. Then it began moving through a combat pattern that was clearly trained and professional. It advanced using cover, checking corners, maintaining fields of fire. When Taeyang simulated enemy contact, the mech responded with textbook military precision. It returned suppressive fire while repositioning, called out enemy positions using military coordinates, and requested backup through proper communication protocols. The demonstration lasted less than 2 minutes, but in that time, the small toy showed skills that would be appropriate for a trained soldier. The students watched in stunned silence as the miniature machine executed complex tactical maneuvers with absolute confidence. When Taeyang finally shut down the combat simulation, The mech returned to its neutral stance, but the classroom atmosphere had completely changed. Every student now understood that they were not looking at a toy in the traditional sense. Daehyun spoke first, his voice serious. That machine moved like a combat veteran. The tactics were flawless. The decision-making was instant and appropriate. Taeyang, if this is a toy, what are your actual military mechs capable of? Taeyang's expression became uncomfortable. He looked down at his remote, then back up at the class. I am not military. I do not know all the details. But yes, the military uses similar technology. Much larger. Much more powerful. Much more dangerous. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. Hiren finally spoke, her voice soft. Humans build these as hobbies to understand how the real ones work. I suppose so, Taeyang admitted. We like to understand things, and we like challenges. This hobby gives us both. Professor Velness's crystalline form seemed to pulse with thought. Class, I believe we have learned something very important about human culture today, but perhaps we need to discuss what it means. The classroom erupted in questions and concerned voices. Students spoke over each other in various languages and communication methods. Jiwon's telepathic voice cut through the noise, sharp with worry. Minho's scales changed color with agitation. Sujin's plant-like features drooped with distress. Professor Velness raised her crystalline hands, creating a chiming sound that brought order back to the classroom. Please, one at a time. Let us discuss this calmly and academically. Sujin spoke first, her voice gentle but shaking. Taeyang, I must ask. Why do humans teach their children about war? My people have not had conflict in over 1,000 years. We raised our young to nurture life, not to understand how to end it. Your toy is sophisticated and impressive, but it frightens me. What kind of childhood includes learning to pilot war machines? Taeyang sat down on the edge of the demonstration platform, the mech standing silently beside him. He seemed to be choosing his words carefully. It is not about war, not really. Let me try to explain human history and culture. He pulled up a holographic display from his personal device, showing images from Earth. Humans evolved as predators. We have always been hunters and fighters. For most of our history, we had to be. We had dangerous animals to defend against. We competed with other tribes for resources. And yes, we fought wars. The images showed ancient human warriors, medieval battles, and historical conflicts. The alien students watched with various expressions of concern. But something changed a few thousand years ago. Taeyang continued. We got better at survival. We built cities, developed agriculture, created technology. We did not need to fight every day just to live. But we still had those instincts, those drives to compete and test ourselves. New images appeared showing human sports and competitions. Boxing matches, martial arts demonstrations, strategy games, racing competitions. So we channeled those instincts into games and sports, Taeyang explained. We created ways to compete that did not actually hurt anyone. We took the things that made us good at fighting and survival, and we made them into entertainment and education. Hiren leaned forward, her 4 eyes focused intently. You turned warfare into recreation? In a way, yes, Taeyang agreed. Martial arts teach combat skills, but now we practice them for discipline, fitness, and sport. Strategy games teach military thinking, but we play them for mental challenge. And mech building teaches engineering, tactics, and problem solving, but we do it for fun. Minho tilted his reptilian head. But why keep the violent elements at all? Why not create games and hobbies that have nothing to do with combat? We have those too, Taeyang said quickly. Humans have thousands of different hobbies. Art, music, cooking, gardening, building, exploring. But many of us are drawn to competitive activities. We like to test ourselves against challenges and opponents. He gestured to his mech. This hobby combines many things humans enjoy. Engineering and building because we like to create. Strategy and tactics because we like to think and plan. Competition because we like to test our skills. And yes, it has combat elements, but nobody gets hurt. It is all simulated, Daehyun rumbled thoughtfully. I am beginning to understand. On my world, we also have warrior traditions, but we keep them separate from civilian life. Only those who join the military learn combat skills. You are saying humans believe everyone should understand these things? Not everyone participates in mech hobbies, Taeyang clarified. But yes, the knowledge is available to anyone who wants to learn. Humans believe that understanding dangerous things makes them less dangerous. If you know how weapons work, you respect them more. If you understand combat, you appreciate peace more. Jiwon's telepathic voice was puzzled. This seems backwards. My people believe that spreading knowledge of violence only creates more violence. Taeyang pulled up more images, these showing mech hobby conventions on Earth. Thousands of humans of all ages gathered together, displaying their creations. Children and adults working together on complex engineering projects. Teams coordinating during competitions. Communities supporting each other. Look at these events, Taeyang said. Yes, the mechs are designed for simulated combat. But look at what happens around them. People cooperate. They share knowledge. Experienced builders teach beginners. Different teams help each other solve technical problems. We compete fiercely during matches, then share drinks and stories afterward. He showed videos of competitions. The mechs fought intensely, but when a match ended, the pilots shook hands or embraced. Winners helped losers repair their damaged mechs. Everyone studied everyone else's designs and offered suggestions for improvements. The combat is not the point, Taeyang explained. The combat is the excuse to bring people together. It is the framework that lets us exercise our competitive instincts in a controlled way. What matters is the community, the shared challenge, the mutual respect. Sujin watched the videos with growing understanding. So the violence is symbolic? A representation rather than the reality? Exactly, Taeyang said with relief. When my mech defeats another mech in competition, nothing actually dies. No one is harmed. We just determine who built the better machine or had the better strategy that day. Then we analyze what happened, learn from it, and improve for next time. Professor Wellness had been quietly observing the discussion. Now she spoke. Taeyang, you mentioned earlier that humans no longer have many natural predators. Can you explain how that relates to this hobby? Taeyang nodded. Humans evolved to handle danger and challenges. Our brains are wired for it. But modern human civilization is very safe. Most humans will never face a real predator or fight in a real war. Some people think this makes us soft or bored. He gestured to his mech again. Hobbies like this give us artificial challenges. They let us exercise parts of our brain that evolution designed for survival and combat. But in a completely safe environment, we get the satisfaction of overcoming difficulty without any real danger. Daehyun stood and walked closer to the mech, examining it again with new eyes. So this toy is not preparing human children for war. It is giving them a substitute for war. Yes, Taeyang said firmly. Humans know we have aggressive instincts. We know we enjoy competition and challenge. Instead of pretending these instincts do not exist, we create healthy outlets for them. Sports, games, hobbies like this. We acknowledge our nature and channel it into positive directions. Hyeron asked the question that several others were thinking. But Taeyang, you showed us that your hobby teaches real combat skills. Real tactical thinking. If humans never need to fight, why maintain these skills even in symbolic form? Taeyang was quiet for a moment. That is a harder question. I think part of it is respect for our history. Humans faced many dangers to get where we are now. These hobbies honor the skills that kept our ancestors alive. But also, he paused, seeming to struggle with how to explain. Humans always want to be prepared. We hope for peace, but we understand that the universe can be dangerous. Keeping these skills alive, even as hobbies, means we never forget how to defend ourselves if we must. But we hope we never have to. Minho's scales had returned to their normal color, his agitation fading. This is fascinating. So human culture embraces its violent past but transforms it into something constructive? That is one way to put it, Taeyang agreed. We do not deny what we are. We accept it and work with it. Every human culture has warrior traditions, but in modern times, most of those traditions are practiced as arts or sports, not actual warfare. Professor Wellness created another chiming sound to gather attention. Class, I believe we are witnessing something important. Taeyang has shown us that cultural artifacts can reveal deep truths about a people. His miniature mech tells us that humans understand themselves very well, including the parts of themselves that might be dangerous. She turned to Taeyang. You said earlier that this hobby brings people together. Can you tell us more about the community aspect? Taeyang's face brightened with enthusiasm. Oh yes, that is my favorite part. The mech community on Earth is huge and very friendly. When I started at age 12, I knew nothing about engineering or programming. Older hobbyists taught me everything. They did not have to, but they wanted to share their knowledge. He pulled up images of workshop spaces where groups of humans worked together on their mechs. We have community workshops where people can use tools and help each other. We have online forums where thousands of people share designs, solve technical problems, and offer advice. When someone creates an innovative design, they usually share it freely so others can learn from it. Even though you compete against each other? Ji-won asked telepathically. Especially because we compete, Taeyang said. The competition is meaningless if your opponent is weak. We want everyone to build better mechs so the competitions are more challenging and exciting. A victory against a strong opponent means more than a victory against a weak one. This concept seemed to surprise many of the alien students. Daehyun rumbled with what might have been approval. You strengthen your rivals to strengthen yourself. There is wisdom in that. The atmosphere in the classroom had shifted dramatically from the beginning of the lesson. What started as alarm and concern had transformed into genuine curiosity. Students who had initially recoiled from the miniature mech now found themselves drawn to it, asking questions and examining its construction. Minho was the first to break the new mood. Taeyang, may I try controlling your mech? I would like to understand how it feels to pilot one. Taeyang looked surprised but pleased. Of course. Let me switch it to basic training mode first. The controls can be sensitive. He handed the remote to Minho and walked him through the basic controls. The two joysticks controlled movement and turning, while the buttons managed different functions. Minho's scaled hands were larger than human ones, but he managed to grip the controller. Start with simple walking, Taeyang instructed. Just push the left stick forward gently. Minho did so and the mech lurched forward, taking awkward steps. It nearly fell, but its stabilization systems caught it at the last moment. Minho hissed with surprise, then tried again. This time the mech walked more smoothly. It is harder than it looks, Minho admitted. The machine wants to help, but I must learn to work with it, not against it. Exactly, Taeyang said. The AI assists, but you are still in control. It takes practice to develop the feel for it. Most people need weeks before they can do basic combat maneuvers. Hyeron approached next. May I try as well? Over the next half hour, nearly every student in the class took a turn controlling the mech. Ji-won found the experience particularly interesting, because her telepathic abilities let her sense the machine's electronic responses. Daehyun, with his military training, picked up the controls quickly and managed to execute several complex maneuvers on his first try. Sujin was initially reluctant, but when she finally tried, she discovered that the gentler control movements suited her nature. She made the mech perform slow, deliberate movements, treating it less like a weapon and more like a dance partner. This is actually quite beautiful, Sujin said softly as she made the mech move through a graceful pattern. When you remove the combat context, it is just elegant engineering responding to precise inputs. Professor Velness watched the interaction with evident satisfaction. This is exactly what Cultural Artifacts Day is meant to achieve. You are all learning to see past your initial reactions and understand the deeper meanings. Taeyang had been explaining the technical aspects to several students when Daehyun called him over. The large crustacean was examining the mech's construction with professional interest. These joints, Daehyun said, pointing with one of his multiple arms, they are remarkably efficient. The power distribution system is clever too. Taeyang, how much of this design is standardized and how much did you customize? About 60% is from the base kit, Taeyang explained. But I modified the leg actuators for better response time, upgraded the processor for faster tactical calculations, and redesigned the power routing for improved efficiency. The paint scheme and detail work are completely custom. You did all this yourself? Daehyun asked. Most of it. I consulted with other builders online for some of the electronics work. That is normal in the community. We share expertise freely. Daehyun was quiet for a moment, his armored form very still. On my world, I am a combat engineer. I maintain and repair military equipment. The skill level required for what you have done here would take years of military training to achieve. And you learned this as a hobby. Many people can do this, Taeyang said modestly. I am not special. There are builders much more skilled than me. That is what concerns me, Daehyun said, but his tone was not hostile. Humans have militarized their recreation so thoroughly that civilian hobbyists possess professional-level skills. This is either very dangerous or very wise. I am not sure which. Perhaps both, Professor Velness suggested, joining their conversation. Humans seem to have found a way to keep dangerous knowledge alive, while minimizing its dangerous applications. They practice war without waging it. Ji-won floated closer, her telepathic voice thoughtful. I have been considering what Taeyang said about understanding dangerous things making them less dangerous. On my world, we suppress knowledge of violence hoping that ignorance will prevent conflict. But perhaps that only makes us vulnerable when conflict finds us anyway. Hieron added her perspective. Valtorians value peace above all else. We have achieved it by removing ourselves from anything aggressive, but I wonder if that makes our peace fragile. If we do not understand conflict, how can we truly choose peace? The discussion was interrupted by Minho, who had been examining the holographic images Taeyang had shown earlier. I have a question about these competitions. You said the combat is simulated and safe, but I see here that mechs are sometimes destroyed. Is that not waste? Damaged, usually not destroyed, Taeyang clarified. And yes, sometimes a mech is too damaged to repair economically. But that is part of the hobby. Building and rebuilding, learning from failures, improving the design. Every loss teaches you something. Besides, most components can be salvaged and reused. So failure is accepted, Minho asked. Failure is expected, Taeyang corrected. No one builds a perfect mech on their first try, or their 10th try. We all fail repeatedly. The community celebrates effort and improvement, not just victory. This seemed to resonate with several students. Sujin spoke up. That is actually a healthy attitude. On my world, we avoid all risk to prevent failure. Perhaps we miss opportunities to learn. Professor Velness decided to guide the discussion toward a conclusion. Class, I believe Taeyang's presentation has taught us several important lessons today. First, we must look beyond our initial reactions to truly understand another culture. Second, practices that seem strange or dangerous may serve important purposes we do not immediately recognize. And third, different species solve similar problems in different ways. She turned to Taeyang. You said earlier that humans channeled their aggressive instincts into constructive outlets. I think we can now see that your mech hobby is a remarkably sophisticated way of doing this. You maintain skills, build community, challenge yourselves, and honor your history, all without actual violence. Taeyang bowed slightly, a human gesture of respect. Thank you, Professor. I was worried that everyone would just think humans are violent and dangerous. We do think humans are dangerous, Daehyun said bluntly. But now we understand that you know you are dangerous and you work very hard to channel that in positive directions. That is wisdom, not aggression. Hieron smiled with all four eyes. Taeyang, I have a proposal. Would you be willing to teach a workshop on mech building? I would very much like to learn this hobby. I think several other students would as well. Taeyang's face lit up with excitement. Really, you want to learn? I want to understand, Hieron said. Not just the engineering, but the philosophy behind it. How humans take something potentially destructive and make it constructive. Minho nodded his reptilian head. I would attend as well. As an artist, I appreciate elegant design. Your mech is functional art. More students voiced interest. Jiwon wanted to study the AI systems. Sojin was curious about the community aspects. Even Daehyun expressed interest in comparing human engineering with Krustian military designs. Professor Velness was delighted. Excellent. Taeyang, would you be willing to establish a mech building club here at the Academy? This could be a wonderful cross-cultural learning opportunity. I would love to, Taeyang said enthusiastically. I brought spare parts and some basic kits with me from Earth, hoping to continue my hobby here. I just did not think anyone would be interested. We are very interested, Hieron assured him. You have shown us something important today. Humans are not afraid of their own nature. You understand your strengths and weaknesses and you work with them honestly. The class period was ending, and students began gathering their belongings and artifacts, but many lingered around Taeyang and his mech, asking questions and making plans for the new club. As the classroom slowly emptied, Professor Velness approached Taeyang privately. You know, she said, her crystalline voice soft. When I saw your case this morning, I was prepared to stop your presentation. I thought you had brought something inappropriate. I was worried about that, Taeyang admitted. But you taught us all something valuable today, Professor Velness continued. You showed us that understanding between species requires looking past surface appearances. Your mech looks like a weapon, but it is really a tool for building community and channeling instincts productively. That is a profound lesson. She paused, her crystalline form shifting through rainbow colors. The galaxy is vast and often dangerous. Perhaps we other species have been naive, trying to forget that danger exists. Humans remember. You prepare. but you do so in a way that strengthens community rather than encouraging conflict. That is remarkable. Taeyang carefully packed his mech back into its case. On Earth, we have a saying, if you want peace, prepare for war. But I think the modern version is better. If you want peace, understand war so well that you never need to wage it. Wise words, Professor Velness agreed. As Taeyang left the classroom, surrounded by new friends asking about mech designs and competition strategies, he reflected on how the day,